Hello everybody, welcome back to Leading Our Own Way. I hope you've all had another amazing week. We're bang into the new year of 26. It's amazing so far. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes at the beginning of January, but we're back. Welcome. Today, I am joined by one amazing person, Ash Butterss. She is someone whose journey is as inspiring as it is relatable. In this first part of our conversation, I've got two parts this week as normal. Ash opens up about her struggles with addiction and the path to self-discovery, sharing how removing the invisible armour we all wear can be the key to genuine connection and happiness. As we unpack the difference between happiness and contentment, the role of fear and the courage it takes to be real, I invite you to reflect on your own journey. Maybe you're leading your own way right now, choosing growth over comfort, connection over isolation. Our energy here today is light, the conversation is honest, and there's wisdom woven through every moment. Let's dive in and see what resonates with you. Here's Ash Butterss, and enjoy. Welcome to Leading Our Own Way. I'm your host, Andrew White, and this is the podcast that unveils captivating narratives of resilience and personal triumph. This podcast is for anyone seeking inspiration and insights on overcoming life's challenges. Follow and subscribe, and then we can lead together forever. Before we dive in, I want to give a big, massive shout out to our now new proud sponsor, Eshu Skincare, a brand that truly aligns with leading our own way. This Australian-born company is dedicated to keeping skincare simple, effective, and straightforward. They've made waves in the US, even landed in Macy's and over 300 stores, and now they're back with a renewed focus on healthy skin and real results. If you want authentic skincare that fits your lifestyle, check them out in the show notes. Thanks to Eshu Skincare for supporting real stories and mental fitness on Leading Our Own Way. And if you're interested in sponsoring like Eshu Skincare, drop us a message. We'd love to connect. Ash Butterss, welcome to Leading Our Own Way. Thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Andy White, thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this chat.
I can tell by the huge smile on your face. It's weird that you say you just full named me Andy White. Growing up, it was never Andy. And it's funny how we were just talking about names before we started recording. You full on randomly Andy Whited me. Everyone used to call me Andy White. I don't know, it just runs off the tongue better, doesn't it?
I know, and this isn't the first time that we've chatted, so it's nice to actually have a bit of rapport with the person on the other side of the microphone. It's rare, so I do feel like we're friends now, and I can call you Andy.
Absolutely. Totally. And, I'm glad you bring that up because I love, that's the reason why I do the pre-chats. I have a lot of people going, let's just get right into it. I'm like, no, I want a pre-chat because I want it to look like we've got two mates talking opposed to a podcaster interviewing its guest. I don't, I want it to be real and just, down to earth as well at the same time as often.
1000%. It's almost like the icebreaker is done and dusted. So we can just move straight into like the hard chat, which I love.
Yeah. But at the same time, enjoying each other's company, right?
1000%.
Well, thanks for joining me on my journey, Ash. It is part of my journey. If nobody listens to it, it's kind of my secret little diary. You know what I mean? And it's and I can take something from it. But I know we're going to be helping, hopefully one day, millions. As I did start off with just wanting to help one person, but I'm like, after listening to one guest a few weeks ago, screw that. I want to help millions now.
I love that. Yes, make the mission big. Why not?
I agree. On that note, you're on a bit of a mission. You're doing things. You've been through things, hence why you're here joining me on my journey, sharing your journey. Leading Our Own Way is about, we all see the same thing in life, but we all feel about what we see differently to the next person. And we all lead our own lives in many different ways, hence why the title is what it is. And what are you doing to lead your own way today then, Ash?
Yeah, I love this question, and what an awesome way to start the conversation. I've been thinking long and hard about this, and I wanted to try to simplify my answer, and the best I can do right here in this moment is to say that the way that I lead my own way is to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. And that is something that is so completely opposite from the way that I used to be. I've gone through a huge transformation in my life over the last 6 years, and it's allowed me to really come home to the person who I really am. I lived most of my life very much based around society's expectations of what I think I needed to do, who I should be, the different masks that I would wear, the different expectations and pressures that I put on myself. And as a result of that, over decades, I became incredibly disconnected from who I really was. I really didn't like the person that I was. And, we'll talk about this further down in the chat. But one of the ways I dealt with that was to self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. And this last 6 years of my life has really been this beautiful, slow journey of coming home to myself and figuring out that we've all been sold a lie. Like, happiness doesn't exist over there. It's actually right here inside of you, and you can access it at any time. You just need the tools to know how.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you bring the word happiness up, and we've tried to dissect the word happiness many, many times. And I have my definition of happiness, and it is threefold. And the viewers, if they listen to every episode, will hear me go on about it all the time. But what's your definition of happiness? I always find it quite interesting how people perceive happiness, because happy isn't one of our 9 survival emotions. So
yes.
What is happiness to you?
Happiness to me is the fundamental belief that I am enough and that I have enough. And to me, you could almost summarize that as either contentment, or another really beautiful word that's used in recovery circles, which is where I live my life a lot of the time now, is serenity. Just having that sense of peace and serenity that I can take a deep exhale and that everything is okay. And that to me is actually far more enriching and far more fulfilling than happiness as such, because happiness can be quite fleeting, and to your point, can often be impacted by the things outside of ourselves, other people's behaviors and words and whatnot. Whereas if I think of my inner happiness, it's actually more about my inner peace. So yeah, it's kind of like I spin it a little bit, but that's when I'm happiest, when I have that feeling of contentment that's inside my soul.
Yeah, I love the word contentment, because I will run over it very quickly, because if we do have any new viewers, I can say it, but the one who do tune into all the time going, oh God, we're going to repeat every episode. So very, very quickly, the 4 C's for me, and I love the fact that you brought contentment. The 4 C's of contentment for me is connection. The first C is connection. The second C is contribution. I think you'll know where I'm going with that. I was a teacher, the podcast contribution to the world. Obviously, the things you're about to explain, what you do, could be your contribution to the world. The third C would be cope. So within cope would be sleep, mindfulness, exercise. And the fourth C would be cook. And we talk about nutrition on this quite a lot, because, with the food-mood connection contributing to our mental health as well. And happiness. I love how you said that you're inner peace. Let's say you annoyed me right now and made me angry. It doesn't mean I go away from the happiness or contentment in my life. And happiness for me is threefold, and it's a long-term state. And that makes up of, one, understanding my purpose in life. When you have why do you get up every morning? What do you get up for every morning? And that's obviously different for everybody. Enjoyment, finding enjoyment in the things that I do, even work, even getting up and what I do every day. It's important that people enjoy, because I do think the majority of us are living in fear, going to work, in the grind, right? And then that third part of happiness would be satisfaction. So when you finish doing what you enjoy, you're satisfied, because if you're not, well, then it doesn't make up the foundation of happiness. I know we've probably gone off a little bit, but you see where I'm going with that. And I listened to somebody say that, and I was like, that makes sense. And I kind of manipulated it slightly.
I like that you've broken it down and made it your own, because I think that, I've got this whole joke that I believe we need to give the word contentment a real PR spin, or marketing revamp, because it's so not a sexy word, but I honestly think it is the most beautiful emotion, feeling, state of being that there possibly is out there. And yet it doesn't sound super sexy. If I'm working with clients and I'm saying, after our time together, you're going to feel peace and contentment. It's kind of and especially if you've never felt that, because you don't know how good it is until you actually get there. And that's why I spent over 2 decades chasing the happiness trap rather than the inner peace and the inner contentment, which is far more fulfilling and far less fleeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the people, the type of people that you help and support and talk to on a daily basis, do you feel then modern society has replaced happiness with pleasure?
Yeah, it could be. I think that it's, it all comes back to the world of advertising and the fact that we're being sold to on a constant basis. And now with social media at our fingertips every waking moment of the day, there's always this constant feedback, telling us that we're not enough, that we need this. And when you get this, then you'll be happy. My TED talk is this whole idea that what school doesn't teach you about happiness is that happiness is really an inside out job. Whereas the world that we live in today markets to us constantly that it exists in the thing. Once you get the job, once you get the new car, once you get the person, and then you marry the person, and then you have the 2.5 kids. Yet what had happened for me in my own story is I kept ticking the boxes that society told me I needed to be happy. And yet every time I achieved one of those things, I would feel this incredible gaping hole in my soul. And I would be convinced that there must be something wrong with me because I'd done everything that I was told I needed to do. And yet I was feeling more and more and more disconnected and more unhappy.
It feels like that's some of those things you just said. There was like a tick box of me. I was looking for the next best thing, new car. I was looking for being the perfect dad, which I couldn't be if I wasn't working on the inner self, which I spent a few years doing. When life crisis, you almost pass or you go through some form of crisis, it makes you change your mentality towards stop looking for these fixes. Mine was pleasure eating, and mine was almost dying from sepsis shock and workplace bullying way before that, just a build up of everything. And I was looking for the new car, the new house, the new fancy career dream job that I wanted and got, but still wasn't good enough. Do you know what I mean? And then self-doubt and everything, and then crisis creates change, doesn't it, usually? For you then, if I was interviewing, you said 6 years ago, up till about 6 years ago, if I was interviewing the Ash 7 years ago, what would how a conversation look like? Without going obviously too deep, because we're going to get into it, but how would that 7-year-old
So
Ash,
if you were interviewing Ash 7 years ago, well, firstly, I was about 15 kilos heavier, so I looked quite different. I would have had this huge smile and makeup done. And yes, I'm smiling right now, but the difference with the smile that I have now is it's a genuine smile that's coming from my heart. It's not a smile that I have painted on. It's not hiding a deep sadness that lives behind my eyes. It's, the version of me that existed then was so disconnected from the person I truly was, to the point that I was in a marriage that was no longer working. I was living in a city that I didn't want to be living in. And I was doing a job that I had thought on paper was my dream job, working for a Fortune 500 company, traveling all around the world. But I was absolutely miserable. And yet what was so crazy at the time, Andy, was that if you had tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you okay?" I would have said, "Yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about?" Totally. Because even I didn't realize how unhappy I was, because of course I was running the race. I was keeping up with the Joneses. And so I really did quiet that inner voice, that part of me that was saying, "Hey, Ash, I think something's wrong." I would just drown that out with alcohol on a daily basis so that I didn't have to feel the deep sadness that actually existed within my core.
So would the closest people to you in your life been able to tell a difference between the authentic smiles that you give now every day to the fake ones that you now realize weren't real and authentic back then?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, anybody that knew Ash before getting sober and the version of me today, like everybody has seen this significant change. It's not like I got the old version of me back, because I don't think I've been running from myself since I was 3 years old. So I don't think I ever really knew who I truly was. But now I'm just me. and people can feel that. And I let people in, you know, all of that invisible armor that I think so many of us put up as a way to protect ourselves. You know, I was a master at wearing that armor. I was so guarded, and I was so strategic at who I would let in and how much of you I'd allow you to see of me. And I was always changing my personality, my preferences to make sure that you would love me. So it was really inauthentic. And I think you can feel that when you're in the energy of somebody who is showing up as they are in their true essence, or somebody who's really trying to be validated and loved.
Yeah, absolutely. So the friends of Ash, previous to the 6 years, did they ever say anything that, well, there's something wrong, you're drinking too much or something? You know, did they ever come to you and expose? Or was it just normality? This is Ash, this is fun Ash, she's got a smile on her face, so everything must be okay.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter, Andy. I was very, very good at keeping up appearances. Like I said, I had an incredibly successful job. I was the kind of alcoholic who was waking up at 5 a.m., going to her spin class or her HIIT workout, getting into work, smashing out a full day, managing a team, you know, and then I wouldn't start drinking again until that evening. But then I was drinking to blackout every single night by the end stages of my alcoholism. But because I kept the wheels turning and I was so good at, you know, presenting that shiny version of myself, people didn't really know. I think that a couple of my family members and obviously my husband at the time definitely knew something was wrong. I mean, my husband at the time had his own demons that he was battling with. So unfortunately, that was quite a codependent relationship where we would enable each other's substance use. Yeah. And so he wasn't really in a position to call me out. And that fueled a lot of that behavior between the two of us. But my family were all in Melbourne and I was living in Sydney. So I was really good at hiding a lot of it. And of course, the warning signs were there when I would come home to Melbourne and they were seeing just the amount that I was drinking. But it's interesting, you know, my dad has been in recovery for over 15 years. And I think that they knew I wasn't ready yet and they were just waiting for me to get to that point. Because one thing is for sure, if you're not ready to get clean and sober, you're not ready. And you do have to have that rock bottom moment to have what we call the gift of desperation, which puts you in enough pain, as you said, to make a change. And so they were waiting patiently and painfully a lot of the time for them, for me to hit that rock bottom moment, which is what happened at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my former guest that I interviewed, Ray Bonney, I don't know if you heard of Ray Bonney. She has an OAM and she is the vice president on the board of Beyond Blue, and she went through alcoholism as well. And she said during the episode, which completely knocked me off guard, but it changed my perspective of it slightly. She said, actually, Andy, alcohol actually saved my life. I was drinking it. It actually allowed me to get through those really tough times. Even though that was a demon within itself, the alcohol saved her. And obviously she came clean and got rid of that. Do you understand that perspective? Would you say that saved you from the other parts of your life, or that just contributed and made it just far worse, put it on fire?
Yeah, one of the ways that I view my relationship with alcohol for a period, it was my solution.
Yeah.
So whether I was mad, glad, happy, sad, alcohol was always present in my life. And one of the things that it did really well for me was it helped to dial down the inner critic, which is something that I have had. I have had the nastiest inner critic, the itty bitty shitty committee, up in my head from a really, really young age. Like I'm talking 2-3 years old. I've got these memories of just having this voice telling me, you're not good enough, you're unworthy, you're unlovable. And that's why when I took my first sip of alcohol at the age of 12, I fell in love with it, because for the first time that I could have ever remembered in my life, the volume of that inner critic was just dialed down. You know, the radio wasn't turned off completely, but the noise inside my head, that deep inner hatred was dialed down for a period of time. And so, you know, I thought, oh my goodness, I've found the solution to life. I've found the thing that's going to allow my life to be manageable. And for a long time, it actually worked. You know, alcoholism is a progressive illness. And even though I drank to blackout from my very first drink at age 12, and I was a binge drinker for a really long time, the progressive nature of the disease meant that I went almost, you know, a good 10, 15 years before the wheels started to fall off. And it wasn't until the last 2 years where I had lost the power of choice and I had become a daily drinker. Up until then, I was still that party girl, Ash.
Yeah. So the thermostat, that delta phosphate thermostat in your body, in our bodies, where where addiction takes place, your thermostat goes high, doesn't it? Because you get your dopamine hits and it goes further and further up. So to the point of your end part of your journey, to the point of blackout, obviously the increase of alcohol, that thermostat inside, how high would you say it got to a point where the wheels fell off? Would it be one bottle? Would it be 6? Where did it go to?
One bottle, that was a warm-up.
Well, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I wanted to be nice.
my tolerance was incredibly high by the time I stopped drinking. So an average night for me would have looked like I would have gone to the bottle shop, picked up 2 bottles of wine, and for some reason, I mean, I know why I did it, because I was trying to hide my drinking at that stage. I would get those little tiny mini vodka bottles, and I would have 4 of those in the car on the way home, and then I'd throw those in the bin, and then I'd walk into the house holding the 2 bottles of wine. Wow. And then I would drink those 2 bottles of wine with the person I was with, which was most of the time was my husband. He's now my ex-husband, but my husband at the time. I would be drinking with him, you know, and pretending to drink somewhat like a lady, but then I'd be sneaking back to the fridge, and that whatever vodka was in the freezer, I would then be drinking that in between the glasses that I was having, because the wine just didn't hit the spot fast enough. And give me the effect that I was looking for, because I certainly wasn't drinking for the taste or the enjoyment. It was purely by that stage just about the effect. So yeah, I'd be doing 2 bottles of wine and maybe half bottle of vodka every single night.
Wow. Okay. Well, I know we're gonna get into that. Let's go back to what you're currently doing on a daily basis. And I think we should probably start with your TEDx talk. Let's talk about, if you can see this big, beautiful picture of Ash. She did the TEDx talk in Mornington, which is here in Victoria, in Australia, for my other viewers around the world. Something actually I actually have here, a little note to manifest it myself, to be honest.
Yes, so, good on you, Andy. It'll happen.
Talk to us a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about your talk and how that might have helped change the trajectory. Even because talks, I've done a few public speakings myself, and I've got another one in 3 weeks' time. They set off a bit of energy, doesn't it, to change and go in a certain direction. How did your TEDx talk go then?
Look, the opportunity to do the TEDx talk was absolutely, I think, for anybody who enjoys public speaking or is on a mission, has something to say, wants to change the world, getting on the red dot, as we call it, is an absolute milestone moment. And it was something that had been on my vision board too. And the lead up to it was incredibly exciting. It was a lot of rehearsals, a lot of work and time and passion went into it. And then, of course, the actual day of it, I mean, it was over in the blink of an eye, you know. Yeah. It's just like, what?
12
all
minutes.
of that for, yeah, it was, you know, it was super quick. But and so I'm grateful for the experience, and I'm really grateful that I got to do it in front of a live audience and that I got to share part of my story. I really wanted to be able to help people understand what the blocks were for them to come back to themselves, for this whole thing that I'm so passionate about, helping guide people home to themselves. And in the talk, I talk about how, you know, the invisible armor that I mentioned. And I think that's really important to understand, that we all do this to a degree. It doesn't matter if you had the most perfect upbringing in the world or whether you grew up with significant trauma. There is going to be some level of armor that you put between you and the world around you. But the dangerous thing about that armor is if it's very thick and heavy and reinforced, I mean, think about medieval times. You know, you think about the plated armor with the helmets and you can only see through. That's how some people are moving through the world. It's just invisible.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is, yes, to a degree that will protect you from being hurt because you've got this armor around you. But what it also stops you from doing is connecting to yourself, because underneath that armor, that's where your heart and soul live.
Yeah.
And so if you move through the world unable to connect with yourself, what are you going to feel? Disconnection. And I would argue that we are in a disconnection epidemic across the world. You know, loneliness like never before, suicide like never before. Just this week, 2 people that I grew up with have both men taken their own lives.
This week?
Just in the last 7 days.
Oh my Lord, I'm so sorry.
It's crazy, you know, and I'm seeing, and they weren't even in recovery circles where I spend a lot of my time, let alone what's happening in those rooms as well. It's absolutely devastating. And I do think a lot of that has got to do with the fact that we are more disconnected from ever, because we are trying to protect ourselves and we haven't been given the tools to actually be vulnerable, to let the guard down, to let people in. You know, it's a lot of the time now, and this is one of the things that I think bothers me a little bit as well. I think that we've gotten really good at talking about mental health, say, you know, and in the corporate space, and but it's become a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? You know, it's almost like the corporate checklist. Have we done our mental health exercise for this week, rather than actually really getting to the core of like, who in my team is not okay and how do we support them? And, you know, to the organization whom I was working for, to their credit, when I got to my hands and knees and I got to that point where I had to go to rehab, they were fantastic. But then I came out of rehab and they didn't know what to do. Yeah. You know, we just didn't really talk about it. It was just back to business, you know. Yeah. That was also the start of the COVID pandemic. So that was kind of crazy as well. So I think there's a long way to go, but I talk about this idea of invisible armor, and being able to remove that invisible armor is the first step to you coming back to yourself, this journey of coming home to self and finding that inner peace and contentment that we were talking about. And then the second thing I talk about is actually learning how to slow down so that you can tune in, because we are so busy, right? The world is pulling our attention here, there, and everywhere. From the minute you wake up in the morning, the minute you pick up your phone, you are distracted, you are under pressure, there is more expectation than ever before. And all the while, when you are focusing on the life that exists out there, you're totally disregarding what's actually happening inside you. And like I said, the answers are already there. We just have to get quiet enough and still enough to be able to tune in. And so in the talk, I guide everybody through a very brief practice that they can do, which is this heart activation technique where you visualize your heart chakra, the color emerald green, which is the color of Anahata chakra in yogic philosophy. And you just spend a little bit of time breathing into your heart, which is such a potent practice. It's so simple, but meditation, yoga, and breath work are huge foundations of my life today. So I share a little bit about that. And then the third and final pillar to coming home to yourself, something that you mentioned earlier, Andy, is learning to let go of fear. Because fear is this corroding thread that is interweaved through the fabric of our lives. It is everywhere. And I think that so many people would be living happier, more fulfilled lives if they stopped letting fear sit in the driver's seat of their life. Like, you know, and I finished the talk asking the question, what would you be doing with your life today if fear wasn't in control?
Just taking a very quick break to thank our sponsor, SU Skincare. If you haven't heard of them, SU Skincare started right here in Australia, using Australian ingredients to make skincare straightforward and accessible, especially for men who want results without the fuss. Their journey took them all the way to the US, where they were featured in Macy's and over 300 stores. Now they're back with a fresh approach, focusing on healthy skin and authenticity for everyone. I'm proud to have SU Skincare as a sponsor on Leading Our Own Way. See the show notes for their website and to see how you can keep your skin healthy and confident. And if you're interested in sponsoring like SU Skincare, drop us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Now, right back to the episode.
Because here's the reality. You can continue doing exactly what you're doing right now, and I can guarantee you that in 5 years, nothing will have changed. How are you going to feel about that? Does that terrify you, or are you okay with that? Now, if you're okay with it, fine, keep going, But if the idea of nothing changing from now and into 5 years' time, if that terrifies you a little bit, then you can do something about it. But you can't let fear lead your life, because it wants to keep you small. It wants to keep you stuck. So you've got to be able to unhook yourself from that. And that's not easy. Again, you need tools to be able to reprogram and rewire your neural pathways, which have always done things a certain way. But the really cool thing is neuroplasticity and how the brain works. You can do that at any age. Like, you are never too old to rewire your thinking. And something as simple as a gratitude practice is going to help with that. So yeah, that was sort of the overarching essence of the talk. And it was just an incredible opportunity. But I will be really honest with you, Andy. This is something I want to warn you about. It was quite ironic that my whole talk was about, happiness doesn't exist out there. Happiness is in here. Because the day after the TED Talk, I felt so flat. Because
that was the dopamine drop.
I'd achieved the thing that, had been on my vision board for years. And I had just once I achieve that, then I'll feel the thing that I'm looking, that I've been searching for my whole life. And, surprise, surprise, which is such a cool, humbling lesson. It's not it. And it showed me so clearly that it's never going to be the next thing. That doesn't matter. That doesn't change no matter what. And I think that's the same for everybody on this earth, no matter how successful you are, celebrity status, cars, houses, businesses, whatever. Some of the wealthiest, most famous people in the world are the most miserable. And yet we are still conditioned to believe that they are the happy ones. And it's just simply not the case.
Definitely not. I completely agree. Do you think then, I read a quote I'm interviewing the author of Live Like a Lobster, Bridget Hancock, and there's a quote in there that says, change often occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of making a change. Do you think then, with your knowledge, and I know we're going to get into what you do on a daily basis soon, and there's something else I want to talk about, but do you think we do have to go, because I'm trying to get to the conclusion, right? And everyone, obviously, my algorithm is you guys. I speak to the guests, and they've all been through, 80% of them have been through some form of crisis in their life. That's catalyst the change. Do you think we have to go through crisis to change our trauma into wisdom, to work through our emotions and take the emotion out of the trauma, which obviously becomes wisdom? What do you think?
I wouldn't say that it is 100% necessary, but I do think that there is a very common thread between people who have experienced that level of pain that has then catapulted them. It's been a catalyst for change. So I don't think it's a set rule that, if you're sitting here listening along right now going, well, I haven't had any trauma, so I can't be successful. That's certainly not what we're saying.
That's definitely not what I'm saying, no.
However, I do think that absolutely that pain, it's the gift of desperation, right? It propels you forward because you're so hungry and so desperate to not feel that again. But what's really interesting, and I'll point out as well, is everybody's rock bottom looks different.
Absolutely.
So my rock bottom, I didn't lose it all. Whereas a lot of people I speak to, they lose the car, they lose their children, they lose the job, whatever it is, they lose their license. None of that had happened to me, which is partly why this disease is so insidious, because I was able to delude myself into thinking, number one, that I wasn't an alcoholic because I hadn't lost it all. How could I possibly be an alcoholic? I'm a 32-year-old woman with a great job and a marriage and a home in Bondi and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the truth was the hole in my soul, that deep sense of just absolute hopelessness, the fact that I was drinking every single day when I didn't want to be drinking, and that I looked in the mirror and I absolutely hated the woman that looked back at me, that was enough for me to want to change. I knew that I couldn't do another day. When I finally hit that rock bottom moment, I knew deep down that I could not keep doing this. I either had to stop drinking or I didn't know how long I was going to be around, because I couldn't stay living in the life and the existence that I was living in. For other people, it's going to take a lot more. And for some other people, it's going to take less.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
It's so weird, that whole rock bottom, when we say we hit rock bottom. Not that we want to, but there'll be, if something else happens, something else could happen in your life where you just chip a little bit further into that rock, right, and go even further. There's no rock bottom, is it? You could just keep going.
Well, we say in recovery, there's always a trapdoor.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I don't like that, but I get it, and I like that. Yeah. Wow. I'm also speaking to a fellow podcaster behind the smile. Talk to us a little bit about that. You're doing pretty well, right?
Oh my goodness, Behind the Smile is my baby, and thank you.
I know how you feel.
It's an absolute passion project. So I started Behind the Smile in 2022. So I was about a little over 18 months sober. And the reason I was so passionate about starting Behind the Smile, which is a podcast designed to remove the stigma around mental health, trauma, and addiction at its fundamental core. That's what it's about. And what I do in those podcast episodes is I bring people in and they bring in a photo from a time in their life where they were hiding behind a smile. And we use that as the launch pad into their story, and we have a conversation about that. And funnily enough, I'm episode 1, I share my story, and the photo that I chose was my rehab intake photo, because in that photo, I'm sitting there, like I mentioned, quite a bit heavier than I am now, no makeup on, and I'm smiling from ear to ear. Like, it is crazy.
I don't have any of them, do I? I've got a few pictures here of you, but
yeah, I can send you the photo.
Yeah,
it's awful. It's awful. And it's, quite humbling putting that up on the internet and allowing everyone to see it. But that was my real moment of like calling myself out and taking the contrary action. If I wanted to change the person that I'd been all these years, the girl that painted on a face and hid behind a smile, then I had to show that real unfiltered version of myself. And part of the reason I started the podcast was because back then, it seems like not that long ago, it's only 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. Back then, Andy, when I was looking at the landscape across social media and podcasting, particularly in the sobriety space, there wasn't anyone that I could find that looked like me, that had a similar story. And I was really craving that. I think had I had a little more, what would you say? I think if I had had a few people that I could follow, a few women whose tail lights I could follow back when I was in the corporate world drinking so heavily, maybe I would have gotten sober sooner. But like I said, I didn't know any other women in their early 30s who were suffering the way I was. Now, the reality is there's thousands upon hundreds of thousands of women like me in 12-step programs who are on this sober journey. And the sober sphere has exploded across social media in the last 3 years. And there's incredible podcasters, some of whom have become great friends, and I love that. But I still think to this day, people aren't getting honest with what's really going on. I think as a whole, we are still hiding behind the smile. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're battling with substance abuse, but maybe there's trouble in your relationship at home. Maybe you're dealing with grief. Maybe something's going on with one of your children, and we're still painting on that smile and telling everyone we're okay. And that's really what I'm trying to shift, to support people to be able to say, you know what, I'm actually not okay. And I just heard somebody share their story about how they started learning how to step out from behind the smile and live authentically. Maybe I can do that too.
Yeah. Agree. I mean, I align with that completely, hence why I want to share. I mean, my niche is probably so big, and that's probably why I can't reach a lot, because the stories are completely different, but it all goes under that same umbrella, what you've just said. Somewhere along the line, you will align to some of my viewers, and then the bully journey or the cancer journey might align with someone else, and you're right. What I've learned through this podcast and my own journey was I was so open. I was quite the opposite to most people. I mean, I did put a mask into it, but when I was on the dog park, I'd find myself being very, very open. But venting, it's great, but it doesn't solve the problem. Venting releases the undesired emotions every day, but then you go to sleep and it starts again the next day. And does that make sense? So I found myself venting every single day, talking to strangers on the dog park, being very open, and they probably thought I was some weirdo. But I would be venting every day, releasing the undesired emotions. You feel good, but then the next day would come, and over a long time, that's just putting that mask on, and you realize nothing changes. So you just, I suppose, you just go, well, this is me forever. And again, now I love to talk. I've always loved to talk. And that's why I created the podcast, because I get to share these incredible journeys. And if somebody can take a piece away and go, oh, I can relate to that. Or even my friend is going through that, I think they should listen to this. If we can get that message out there. And I'm guessing you're the same with Behind the Smile. And it's such a beautiful name to a podcast, isn't it? It just makes sense totally, yeah. Do you how often do you film? Do you have it in series, or does it go out constantly?
So I've been dropping an episode every week since it began. I did take a 6-month break from the podcast at the end of, oh my goodness, when was it? It was in the middle of 2024. And this was really interesting. And this is something as well that I've been very honest and transparent with my audience about. So what had happened for me, and this is really common for people who start their sobriety journey, in the first 12 months, I lived and breathed recovery. I was fighting for my life, and I held on with dear life, and I did, it was everything I consumed. And whilst I've still stayed close to the recovery community that I'm a part of, it's not my everyday thing anymore. And I often say sometimes now, the fact that I'm sober is probably one of the least interesting things about me. And I say that with love and respect for my sobriety. Like, I'm so blown away that I'm going to be turning 6 years sober, in a month or so. Like, that blows my mind. And I think that's incredible. And I'm not taking away from that. But after a little while, you want to be able to talk about other things. And what I am really passionate about is actually helping people build a life beyond sobriety. So it's like, cool, like getting sober, absolutely, that was the sliding door moment, the number one thing that had to happen. And for anybody who's having a difficult time with their relationship with alcohol, that's got to be the first thing that you address. But my experience after that, once I had started to feel really comfortable in my sobriety and it had become my new life, then this crazy thing happens where the world is your oyster. And I'm so passionate about helping people unlock that, and like I said, come back to who they truly are, because that, I think, is the most beautiful gift. And it's what, again, like, we're all looking for this thing that's going to be the answer, and it actually exists on the other side of sobriety. If you're somebody that has a problematic relationship with alcohol, if you can have a couple of wines and then put down the bottle, all power to you.
Yeah. I know why that part of your life exists, because when you went back to work, you said it was like back to business again, and you didn't know how to maybe, I might be wrong, navigate that new superpower that you've got.
Well, it was really interesting. They say not to make any big decisions in your first 12 months of sobriety. And I took that very seriously. In fact, any bit of advice that was given to me, I took very seriously, and I really listened, and I did what I was told. I was a very good student, particularly in that first 12 months, because again, I was desperate, and I was looking around at these people who had achieved long-term sobriety. And at that time, I couldn't do, by the time I went into rehab, I couldn't do 24 hours of sobriety. So I'm sitting there listening to women who maybe have 3 months of sobriety or 6 months or 6 years. And I'm like, tell me what you did. Like, I am going to listen and I'm going to follow you. So that first 12 months was really interesting, Andy, because I got out of rehab, and then about 10 days later, we went into lockdown for the first time. The world shut down. It was the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And so I was doing my recovery meetings online, and I was doing that at 8 a.m. And then right at my desk where I was living in Bondi, I would then log on to work at 9 a.m. and then I'd still work my full day, because the industry that I was in did not did not close down. And then I would maybe do another meeting at nighttime and go out for my, whatever we were allowed to do, 1 hour walk or something. And then it was just rinse and repeat. And so that's all I really did for the first 12 months. And then at 12 months, you know, what started to happen over that year is I started to actually figure out who the real Ash was, because the alcohol had been really numbing my senses and disconnecting me from my true self. Once that was removed, it was like the real me all of a sudden started to appear. And that's when I realized, Andy, oh my goodness, I'm in a marriage that I don't want to be in, living in a city that I don't want to be in, doing a job that I don't want to do. And so at a year sober, I ended my marriage and I actually moved back to Melbourne, which is my hometown, and it's where I live today. But the job thing actually took another 12 months. So one thing that we're taught to do in recovery, and this is also part of my meditation practice, is to pause. And learning to pause is like a superpower, because when you learn to pause, you can actually take a moment before reacting and rather respond. And so I started to respond to life rather than react to it. And one of the other really cool things about getting sober for me was all of a sudden I started to get this connection to this inner channel, which I now call my inner voice. And it was this subtle whisper at first saying, this isn't where you're meant to be anymore. And I found that really hard to grapple with at first, because like I said, it was what I had thought was my dream job for so long. And I was like, and I sort of would like push it away, and I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that. You know, we'll put that over there and we'll just keep going. We'll keep going. But I remember walking into the office one day and we were on the phone to Paris and they were screaming down the line, something about lipstick sales. And I thought to myself, this just isn't it anymore. I can't keep pretending. I'm no longer living in alignment. And as a sober human who is fully present in her body and her being, I can't live out of alignment. I actually can't afford to, because if I start to get restless, irritable, and discontent, then I'm more likely to go back to the solution that was my answer to that feeling for 2 decades. And that is to pick up a drink. And I can't afford to pick up a drink, because to drink is to die. So I knew I had to make a change, but I took my time with it. I actually went and did my yoga teacher training while I was still working, and I was doing that part-time on the weekends. Smart. I started deepening my meditation practice. And as a result of that, I got myself into a position where finally I was able to leave my job at 2 years sober. So that was a full 12 months of exploration. And from that point, that's when I started teaching yoga. I started the podcast. I started coaching. Then I became a breathwork facilitator, and the rest is history. Now I get to live this life that I literally pinch myself on a daily basis, because I can't believe that this is my life, and it's just better than anything I could have ever possibly imagined.
Well, that's a perfect point to tell us a little bit about what you do then outside of the podcast and what you do every single day, because you're doing some wonderful things. For example, the retreats and your business. Talk to us a little bit about that and how your day looks.
Yeah, so like I said, I became so passionate at wanting to help other people experience the same transformation that I had, because one thing I know for sure is if I can do it, anyone can do it. This is the thing. It's not this. I think sometimes particularly if you're stuck, on the hamster wheel, living a life that you feel disconnected from, you feel that sense of hopelessness that I was talking about. It can be really, really hard to see maybe someone else online and think that that would ever be possible for you. But I'm telling you right now, if you can let go of the fear, like I said, and actually get really clear on what your passion and your purpose is, and just take the leap, then as long as you're willing to take aligned action, which I think is really, really key, as long as you're willing to take aligned action, then there is no reason why that can't be a reality for you too. So that's what I help people to do. Basically, in a nutshell, I help people come home to themselves. I help people to figure that out. I help people to remove the invisible armor, to then learn how to sit with self and tune in. And that's through beautiful practices like the yoga and the meditation. But I also do a lot of the work around rewiring those neural pathways, as I mentioned, reframing, letting go of negative core beliefs, which keep us so stuck. And through that process of removing the onion layers, my clients get to actually figure out who they really are. Yeah. And sometimes that can be really scary, because you might have the realization like I had, like, holy shit, I'm living a life that I didn't even subscribe to. Like how like it's almost like you wake up one day and it's like, how did all this happen? But the really cool thing is you have the ability to change that if you want to. And the other thing is, what I've done with my life may not be what you want to do with your life, and that's okay as well. But it's about even just coming back to having choice and being empowered to become the director of your own life rather than a bystander. So working with clients on a day-to-day basis, but what I absolutely love doing is running workshops and retreats, like you said. So, oh my goodness, next year is shaping up to be incredible. I've got a 1-day retreat happening in Melbourne in February. So it's the first time I've done a 1-day retreat before, but that's going to be really awesome for, anybody that finds it hard to get away for a long period of time. Maybe they've got young children. And I'm actually running that in collaboration with a friend of mine who is a chiropractor, but he also does Reiki and energetics. So that's really cool. And then I'm running another retreat on the Gold Coast with a friend of mine who's a holistic psychologist. Her name's Laura Corcoran. She's incredible. That's women only. It's called the Embodied Woman Retreat, and that's going to be in May in the Hinterlands, just actually in this incredible Eco View retreat owned by Gwyn Garner. So it's like behind there, which is going to be really cool. And then I'm running my Bali retreat again next year, which I'm so excited about. Bali's my second home. I absolutely love it there. And I ran this retreat in August of this year, running it again August of next year. I think there's only 2 spots left for that one. It's, very popular. But the reason I love retreats so much is I feel like you can do 6 months of transformation work in 5 days. It's like this intense container of transformation, and you get to do it with like-minded people. So it's an incredibly potent experience, but you also just you leave feeling so full of love, not only for yourself, but the people that you've shared that experience with as well. So yeah, super, super potent. And then I run lots of breathworks as well throughout the year as well, which is something I love to do.
What type of breath work do you work on then? Because I know there's lots of different styles out there.
Thank you for asking that question. I was chatting to somebody about this the other day. It's like the same as yoga. If you go to a yoga class, it might be vinyasa, it might be hatha, it might be yin. So with breath work, it's actually the same. So my facilitator training was with Breathless Expeditions. They're absolutely incredible. They're based up in the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales. And part of the training that you do there is actually more around holotropic breath work. So it's a little more like the Wim Hof style where you do quite activating breath works. They also teach us down regulating breath work. So I've been trained in different styles. But for me personally, the ones that I love to facilitate are the breakthrough breathwork sessions. So that's where we use very rapid breath work to increase the oxygen and the carbon dioxide inside the body, which, if you think of it from a scientific lens, what it's actually doing is it's switching off the prefrontal cortex, which is that part of the brain, which is the rational thinking part of the brain that's there, that's keeping, it's assessing the situation, making lots of decisions, and that's on 24/7. Like, it's a really active part at the front of the brain. It was also the last part of the brain to be developed. Now, behind there is your limbic system. And that is what stores your emotions. And then underneath that is the reptilian part of the brain, which is your fight or flight response. So we created reptilian first, then limbic, then prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex obviously has an important job because it's protecting you from danger. But one thing that it also does is, say there is an incident that happens and it's traumatic for you. Now, it could be big T trauma, little t trauma. what the prefrontal cortex will do is it will decide whether or not you're going to process that. And if you're somebody who hasn't been taught how to process their emotions, which is most of us, then the prefrontal cortex goes, not today, mate, and sends it back to your limbic system. And then it gets stored in the body. I'm sure you've heard the saying, the body keeps the score. Incredible book by Bessel van der Kolk. Yes, you got it.
Yep.
So this is the whole idea, right? So we move through life with all of this stuff, all of this unprocessed emotion sitting there that we can't access. And that's why you can go to talk therapy for years and years and years and not be able to access certain memories and certain emotions because they're in a part of the brain that you can't access with your logical, rational thinking mind. Yeah. So we switch that off in breath work, and guess what happens? All of a sudden, those emotions, those memories sometimes that you haven't been able to process for months, years, decades, they start to come to the surface, and they can be released in a number of ways. It might be through tears and emotion. It might be through physical shaking. You might get really hot, really cold. There's all sorts of physical manifestations. But the feeling that you have not only during the breath work, but on the other side of that is almost indescribable. It is a literal weight off your shoulders. If you can imagine, you've been carrying these emotional boulders around for years that are heavy, they're weighing you down, and all of a sudden you get to offload those. That is the most powerful thing about this practice. And I've had things that I've been able to process in a breakthrough breathwork session that I've tried to figure out, for years in therapy, and it still had a hold on me. And then I've done one or two of these sessions and I've, felt so much relief, and it's almost like I'm not beholden to these, I become more empowered and more able to actually be fully embodied rather than be really reactive because of the stuff that I haven't been able to process. So huge fan of the modality. I was a client before I became a practitioner, and there's just the impact that had on my life was like, I have to learn how to do this and facilitate this.
Yeah, incredible. Absolutely incredible. I love it. And I know you're in the process of writing a book, so are all these things inside your book? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I am. I'm writing my memoir, and it's going to be called Behind the Smile, the same as the podcast.
Love it.
And
I want a copy up here, by the way.
Yes, you will definitely have a copy. At this stage, it is actually more about my story than it is a teaching book, you know. And I really, I grappled with that because, the business girl who wants to put her business cap on is like, you could write a book that's got all of these great tools and techniques, and it's a teaching book and an educational book, and people would love that. And I think maybe down the track that is something, but my story at my core, I know I have to write that first. And that was really like this whole journey that I am on, the birthing of the podcast, the work that I do today as a coach, all of that was born from rising from the ashes, surviving what was at times, quite a traumatic childhood, to the woman I am today, and wanting to inspire millions of people around the world to know that, like I said, if I can change, then so can you.
Love it. And I think that, again, is just the perfect timing to go to where this all began, because I remember you saying in the pre-chat that you spent 30 years running away from yourself.
Yeah.
Let's go back to childhood then, because that's a beautiful point, because I love sharing the root of everyone's journeys,
And I think it's so important because the people that we are today, for better or worse, are influenced by those formative years and the experiences that you have. So I grew up in an alcoholic home.
Well, we've come to the end of part 1 with Butterss. Today we explored the transformative power of sharing your story, the courage it takes to face your fears, and the importance of finding real connection in a disconnected world. If Ash's journey resonated with you, please don't forget to check out her podcast, Behind the Smile, and share this episode with someone who might just need it. Stick around though for part 2. There's even more to come, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Rate, review, and follow the show to keep these powerful conversations going. And plus, I really appreciate it. Anyway, we'll be back with more Ash very soon this week. So don't go anywhere. See you then. Join us tomorrow to hear more from today's incredible guests and learn valuable insights to help you lead your own way. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you then.